Good morning, everybody. This is Addison Shonland. Today is October the 9th, 2020, and my guest today is Miguel Ross, who is an aviation consultant in Russia. He is a regular contributor to AirInsight, and by the way, he has his own website. He's the editor, allplane, ALLPLANE.tv, and he also contributes to CNN, The Points Guys, and other travel and aviation-related media. Miguel, thank you for visiting with me today.
Thank you very much, Alison, and good morning to you. It's good afternoon here.
Okay.
I'm not in Russia at the moment. I'm sitting out the lockdowns in Barcelona, but planning to go there soon as circumstances permit.
Sure, fantastic. All right, so just so the audience knows that when you and I have these conversations, we're going to be focusing on Russia and giving the sensitivities of how things are these days. We don't want to call it anything. We'll say Russia and its broadly defined neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's start off talking about, obviously, the pandemic and the COVID situation. How is that impacting the region, shall we say?
Well, as you might imagine, Alison, the pandemic has affected that region pretty much in the same way as the US or Europe. At some point in April, the activity in the air travel sector was down by 90+%, 95%, something like that. It's been picking up since then. And at the moment, this summer, what I read is the activity levels are back around half of what they used to be. Mainly because the international traffic is still very, very seriously restricted. In particular, in Russia, in Kazakhstan, for example, in Ukraine, for some time, there has been a closure of borders. Only a certain amount of flights were being let through. And only certain categories of travelers still today are only allowed under very strict conditions. So if you are a national of those countries that want to go back, there are some countries that have established some, let's say, some corridors, some destinations that are approved. Like, for example, right now from Russia, there's only a handful of countries, I think, that are authorized to for regular traffic.
Is this like a bubble? They're trying to create their own bubbles?
I don't know if bubble is the right word, but let's say they're going step by step and they are opening up gradually. So right now, for example, from Russia, I think it's only half a dozen countries that have completely opened. Turkey, the UK, the United Arab Emirates, and some others. But in other destinations, there's some traffic picking up, but still very, very, very low from
Right.
what it used to be. On the domestic front, inside Russia, which is a huge country, things are a bit different. So far, inside Russia, many restrictions have been lifted already for quite a few months. And it seems that, well, the statistics seem to support that things are getting back to normal slowly. Not there yet, but I've been checking some stats today. And some airlines are reporting numbers for domestic travel that are close to the same numbers last year, at least in terms of movements. And there have been a couple of airlines that have even grown during this period. That are mostly focused domestically. Yeah,
that's amazing. Any news? I know the Russians are very aggressively working on their vaccine, COVID vaccine. What's news about that?
Well, they've got a vaccine that is being tested with a significant number of people already. The information I got so far is that it's promising.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So
who would have thought that they'd be the first ones to potentially have something?
Well, there's a very long scientific tradition in Russia. So when it comes to basic science and research, they're pretty solid.
That's great. So you started to mention the airlines. Let's do a review of the landscape really in Russia and again the broad neighborhood. What are the corrections called? They're abroad.
Well, from Russia, they would call it the near abroad, but I'm not sure that's a term that is shared by, by the people in the near abroad, because obviously you have at the moment a number of conflicts going on between Russia and Ukraine, for example, which actually affected very severely the air traffic between the two countries. You have trouble in the Caucasus. You have also now in Central Asia some issues ongoing. So
and this Minsk is not a happy place either.
And Belarus, of course, yeah, and Belarus as well. It's a focus point now of international.
So the near abroad has got lots of fires to fight.
That's it, yeah.
So tell me, what is, you mentioned briefly the airline landscape. You know, a couple of maybe a week or so ago, we got a nice interview with Aurora. In Sakhalin, and you've actually been to Sakhalin. I don't know if you want to start sort of on the eastern side of Russia and just move your way west.
Yeah.
It's good to hear that there's a recovery in the with, let's say, the domestic travel, because that country is so big. Like the United States, trains just don't work. It's too big.
Well, actually, trains do work pretty well in Russia, and it's a widely used method of transportation. But of course, you're talking about distances that in some cases are more than 8,000, 9,000 kilometers, even more. So you have, I don't know how much that's in miles, like 5,000 miles. Or,
easily, yeah.
Yeah. So you've got domestic. I mean, some of the longest domestic flights, if you exclude the French overseas territories, you have some of the longest domestic flights in the world in Russia, covering 11 time zones, 10 time zones. So it's really crazy. I mean, you have some parts of the country that just pretty much never overlap with the western part of the country, because when they are going to sleep, the west part of the country is waking up. So yeah, so air transport, of course, is very important. If we start focusing ourselves in Russia, you have a main player, which is Aeroflot, the Aeroflot group. As you know, when the Soviet Union, Aeroflot used to be, in Soviet times, actually, Aeroflot used to be the largest airline. I don't know if by all measures, but
certainly by fleet.
By fleet, yes, and it operated everywhere. I mean, down from local helicopter operations in somewhere in remote places in the tundra, all the way to international flights covering all continents. So it was a pretty large airline, and of course, then in the 90s there was all the collapse of that system, and it was broken in many different airlines. Some of these airlines then took different names, and then is the time in the 90s when actually Russian aviation got a bit of a bad reputation, because some of these smaller airlines that resulted from this breakup had some questionable standards, and there were unfortunately some incidents and some accidents happened. But what remained as the core of Aeroflot, that was still kept its name and has been completely turned around. Today it's a very modern competitive airline, and it's a major player in the Russian market. So it's a dominant player, basically. Still owned by the government, 51% owned by the government. And it's not only Aeroflot, but Aeroflot owns a group of different airlines and operate under different brands, and they fulfill different missions. So you have the main, and actually that's in the strategy of the group as well, to divide their operations in these very specialized market niches. So you have the main Aeroflot brand, which is supposed to be the premium airline in the group. It's the most focused on international routes. For example, it offers a very good service, high quality standards. For example, Aeroflot in European routes, it's possibly one of the last few airlines that has a proper business class in the short and medium haul routes. So, and where other airlines have been kind of downsizing this business class activity in the European market, Aeroflot still has like the proper seats, you know, with all the amenities of a proper business class. Yeah. So Aeroflot, it's kind of at the top of the pinnacle, providing this premium service. Well, premium. I mean, you can get still. I mean, it's not all business class, but it's more oriented towards this more corporate market and more full service, let's say.
Right.
And you still can find decently priced tickets. So I mean, in economy, it's not that it's only high fare. But then you have another airline that is called Russia, which means Russia, and that's actually, it used to be the St. Petersburg subsidiary, but this year actually it was in the news a few months ago. There's been a kind of a rethinking of the whole strategy of Aeroflot Group, and the plan is for Russia, that until now was kind of a middle of the way, was something in between the more premium Aeroflot and the low-cost subsidiary we're going to talk about now, which is called Pobeda. Russia was kind of a middle ground and providing service mainly to St. Petersburg, with some routes also out from Moscow, and covering also some of the routes to the far east of Russia, because they took over some of the long-haul planes from Transaero. It used to be the second player in the Russian market. So when it collapsed, it had a long-haul fleet that was taken over by Russia. And now they operate, I'm not sure if you have seen these very colorful Boeing 747s and,
the
7s
with
the
tiger
tiger,
face, right?
yeah, the tiger face, there's a leopard face as well. And they're very focused on doing these domestic operations in St. Petersburg. They have some European flights as well, and the flights to the Far East. And now the plan is that this subsidiary is going to kind of focus on the Russian domestic market. Right now it has around 60 airplanes, but the plan is to grow it to 250. So from now to 2028, the plan is for the Aeroflot main brand to focus on these more premium routes and the trunk markets, and going to Europe and long haul and all that. Then Russia to take over many of these domestic traffic, also opening bases in different parts of Russia, not only Moscow and St. Petersburg, but other regional capitals. And actually, and that might interest you, is that Russia is actually slotted to get most of the Russian-produced aircraft. So it's gonna, most of this growth, most of these 250 aircraft are going to be actually Russian-made aircraft. They're going to get, that's in paper now. So it's, we'll see, I mean, in 8 to 10 years what happens, but they expected to get around 85 MS-21s, and I think something like, well, more than 100 Superjets. I think Aeroflot is going to transfer the whole Superjet fleet to its subsidiary to cover the Russian market. And then they have another, Aeroflot has another company, which I must say, well, it's based on a previous project. It's called, it's a low-cost airline. It's called Pobeda, which means victory. And that's a low-cost airline that is modeled a little bit after the likes of Wizz Air, for example. So it's a completely no-frills airline with lots of ancillaries and offering low prices to travel in Russia, but also they have some international routes as well. I must say here, I had some involvement in the launch of the predecessor airline, predecessor of this low-cost airline. It was a previous incarnation of that airline. It was called Dobrolyot. It was the first attempt of Aeroflot to launch a low-cost airline. Right now, Pobeda is a low-cost airline. It's actually one of the airlines that is growing the most, and it has even grown during this period of crisis. So not a super huge growth, but I think 1% or something like that, which is. But
anything above zero these days is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So it offers an alternative for many of the domestic trips that people take in Russia, because it has a very new fleet, Boeing 737s, 800s, and quite a very efficient operation, and it's been a driver of growth for the whole Aeroflot group in the last few years. And here's the interesting thing, Pobeda is also expected to grow a lot. So now it has around, I don't know the exact number, but it must be between 40 and 50 aircraft, something like that. And the plan is to grow it to 170, I think, something like that. And Aeroflot is going to transfer its 737s to the local subsidiary. But I read, to my surprise recently, that actually the plan is to transition to A321neo in a few years' time. So
that particular airplane seems to have an amazing growing following. Anybody who can get their hands on that airplane seems to want it.
Yeah, I think they are kind of trying to follow the strategy of Wizz Air. So Wizz Air, it's growing like crazy as well right now, opening bases all over Europe, and they are basing that on the 321. So Pabieda is kind of mirroring this. The type of product they have, it's a bit similar as well.
That's amazing. Well, there's some other big airlines in Russia, S7, Ural,
sorry.
UTR.
Before we move to the other ones, you started mentioning Aurora, that you had this very interesting interview on the site recently. Aurora is an interesting case because, to be honest, it's a bit unclear what's happening there. Aurora is only partly owned by Aeroflot. I think it has something like 50 or 51%, something like that. The other half is owned by the local authorities in that region. And again, that part of Russia has its own dynamics because it's 10 or 11 time zones from Moscow. So it's
halfway around the world.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's remarkable how similar it is to the European part of Russia because people speak the same with the same accent pretty much, and you have the same brands, everything. But at the same time, it has its own dynamics. It has like companies there operate in a different, let's say, economic environment because they are very close to China, Japan, Korea, and there was this company. There is this company, Aurora, that was founded by merging different local companies that operated there. But now it's not clear what's going to happen because there were some reports in the media that actually the Russian government wants to either create a new company or restructure this one, or take an existing airline, or incentivize some existing airline to develop air connections in that region, in the Far East region of Russia, the Pacific Coast region. But I've been reading conflicting reports in the media. Some people say that they might create a completely new airline. Some other reports say that, for example, there's a Russian airline called Red Wings that is going to take lots of super jets and Russian-made aircraft. That might be the airline chosen to fulfill this role. Some other reports saying that actually Aurora might be also part of this story. For the time being, it's still part of Aeroflot Group, but there were reports that Aeroflot was actually willing to sell its stake in that Aurora airline. So
interesting.
Bit incognita. It's not clear what's going to happen. What I can tell you is that the Far East of Russia, and actually, as you mentioned, I was there about a couple of years ago. I wrote an article actually because it's a very interesting region. It's a region that doesn't get that many visitors, but it has an amazing nature. It's very close to Japan and Korea, but still it doesn't get too many visitors. And I think there is the idea that, with the proper connections, activities like tourism could be booming in that area, but it's not clear how this is going to be channeled. So yeah, it's a small operation at the moment. In terms of population, it's not a very densely populated area. Think about, Alaska or the Pacific Northwest, something like that. It's this type of environment you have over there. So it's an interesting point of development for Russian aviation, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, so let's talk about S7, Ural, and UTR.
Yes, actually, Aeroflot is dominant, but there's a number. Actually, there are quite a few airlines in Russia that are competing with each other, and they are very, very competitive airlines as well, aside from Aeroflot. S7 actually, at some point during this pandemic, became the #1 airline in Russia. I'm not sure if by number of movements or by traffic, but that's because Aeroflot, obviously all the international traffic basically evaporated. So airlines that had a more strong, that had a strong domestic traffic profile, they actually could sustain operations better. So at some point, S7, I don't know if that's still the case, but S7 became the number one carrier. Possibly that's not gonna last, because as soon as international traffic recovers, it's expected that Aeroflot will retake this place. But S7 is a family-owned business. Actually, one of the owners died tragically recently, I think 1 or 2 years ago, in an air accident in Germany. But the founder is still there, and it's a very innovative airline. They've been launching a number of very technology-based projects in the past. It's very how to say, they're known for doing very good marketing, so they have all these very flashy bright green aircraft.
Right.
They have a kind of hybrid product. I mean, they are not a low-cost airline, but you get a good value product, I would say. And then you have UTR, that is an airline that has it's very based on domestic market, and it's got a number of financial problems in the last few years and still ongoing. So it's a significant operation. It's, I think, over 50 aircraft. I mean, for US standards, that's nothing, but for Russia, it's
yeah. But they also have a lot of helicopters, don't they?
They have helicopters, although the helicopters are operated by a subsidiary. They are the largest operator. Yeah, UTR is actually the largest civilian operator in the world, I think.
Of helicopters.
Yes, because they have their roots in the oil industry in Siberia.
Right.
Actually, I think it's partly owned by a large oil producer.
Gazprom?
No, it's another one.
Rosneft.
No, it's one from Siberia. I don't remember the exact name. I don't remember if it's Surgutneftegas. I don't remember. It's one of the Siberian producers.
I would say, Miguel, in a case if your major owner is in the oil industry, given what the oil industry is like right now, no wonder they're having difficulties.
Well, it's an interesting story because UTR went through a period of crazy growth in about a decade ago, in the first half of this decade. And then they were hit by a previous crisis, currency crisis, around 2014 or something like that. So they had to divest. So they basically downsized to half. They had bought lots of new planes, 767-800s, other new planes, and they had to divest them. And then they kind of recovered a little bit, but they're still kind of they've got some financial issues. So still going, and yeah, it's got a strong domestic customer base in some regions. So we'll see. That's an interesting one to keep an eye on. And obviously there's the helicopters, but the helicopters, I think, they are managed by a separate entity. I don't know if technically they are part of the same group, but yeah, they are very well known for helicopters, and they are very proud of it. So that's at the core of their
right. I think that for a lot of people outside of Russia, it's hard to comprehend some of these airlines that are doing regional work into literally dirt airstrips in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, well, actually,
turboprops.
Yeah, but also there are some of these airlines that are of a significant size. There's another one we didn't mention yet. It's Ural Airlines, that has its roots in the Ural region of Russia, and it's been growing as well. It's a private airline, and it's got around the fleet is around 50 aircraft, something like that. And they've been expanding internationally as well. They have a product that is kind of mid-market product, so they're not low cost, not super expensive. They fulfill a role in that region, but many of these airlines also they have expanded. They have set up based in Moscow, and they are expanding from there. So then there are lots of different regional carriers in smaller cities through Russia. Some of them might be quite small. Maybe they have, I don't know, like 10 aircraft, something like that, but they fulfill a role in that specific region. Normally they link that region to Moscow and St. Petersburg, and then some of them are expanding also, launching some leisure routes, for example, to places like, if you are in the Siberian part of Russia, for example, many leisure routes go to Thailand and places like that.
Warm places.
Yeah. Or on the other side, you go to Turkey or Egypt. There are lots of there's a very strong seasonal traffic for Russians going to holiday.
I think that the interesting thing from this conversation is just how active and dynamic commercial aviation is in Russia, that we in the West may not be as aware of all the stuff that's going on. It's robust.
Yes. It's actually pretty dynamic. I mean, in some of the trunk routes, you have competition. Even if you have little in the way of formally low-cost airlines. So you have only one airline that is technically considered a low-cost airline, but you have many of these airlines are adopting many of the techniques of the low-cost airlines. So very heavy on ancillaries, all that. And actually in some routes you have strong competition. Prices are, it depends on the season, of course, and the routes, but on the main routes you have a strong price competition in places, for example, flying from Moscow to places like Sochi, which would be kind of Russia's Florida, to put it in some way. So it's a place where many people go on holiday. You've got a strong competition there. And also another interesting thing that's happening now is that it used to be a very centralized system, so many flights going through to or from Moscow. But now, and this is something that many airlines now are, well, not many, but some airlines are actually now starting to explore, is to link the dots. So you've got airlines that are starting to focus on the regional connections and flying between these second and third tier cities between them. So without going through Moscow or St. Petersburg. So you have an airline like New Airline, for example, in south of Russia called Azimuth, that it's the only airline in the world that it's a superjet only operator. And those are, for example, they're specializing in doing these links between the south of Russia and other second and third tier cities across the country. And that's the other airline that's been growing during the pandemic. For the timing, it's mostly domestic, almost 100% domestic. And yeah, they've been doing all right so far. Lots of modernization as well in airports. So we mentioned the Far East of Russia. There are some projects there to modernize, for example, places like Kamchatka. They're getting a amazing new airport, new design. In other places in Russia, they got new airports also because of the World Cup. So there's been a lot of investment as well into these airports. And many of these cities, they are managed by 2 or 3 large airport management groups. And yeah. It's a very variable. I mean, some regions have airports that are still like in the Soviet times, pretty much, very outdated. But some others are really like brand new, built for the World Cup 2 years ago. So
it's amazing. Miguel, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation.
Thank you. And yeah, if you have any other questions, just let me know. We haven't talked yet about all the other countries in the region, but maybe we should leave that for another day.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.